I invited my son and his wife to Christmas dinner. On the day, they abandoned me and ate at her mother's house instead. I should have known. Maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it. It was my first Christmas without Randall. He passed in March. 74 years old. Good heart, terrible lungs. He went quick, peacefully, they said, but there's nothing peaceful about coming home to a quiet house after 50 years of marriage. Nothing peaceful about waking up to silence every morning. So this year, I made a plan. I decided I'd host Christmas dinner, just a small one. My son, Michael, and his wife, Whitney. That's it. No big fuss. I just didn't want to be alone. I spent 2 days cooking. Not just heating up food. Cooking. I made Randall's cornbread stuffing from scratch. Ham glazed with brown sugar and pineapple rings. Mashed potatoes whipped with sour cream and butter, just the way Michael liked them when he was growing up. Pecan pie. Sweet tea. Rolls. A green bean casserole that took 2 tries to get right. I even baked cookies, knowing Whitney pretends she doesn't eat sweets, but always sneaks one. The house smelled like home. I hadn't felt that in months. I bought a real tree, too, not one of those pre-lit ones from the garage. A fresh fir. Cost me nearly $100, but I didn't care. Randall would have said it was too much, but he always smiled when he saw it twinkling. I hung all the old ornaments. Our wedding photo in the little red frame, Michael's macaroni star from 2nd grade, the glass cardinal that broke and was glued back together in '92, and I wore the red dress Randall always said I looked beautiful in, the one with the pearl buttons. I hadn't worn it in years, but I needed to feel like myself. I fixed my hair the way he liked it and put on some lipstick. I even got out the china we only ever used at Thanksgiving. Dinner was at 3. I set the table at noon. By 1, everything was ready. The ham rested, the rolls covered in foil, the tea chilling in the fridge. I lit the candles and put on Bing Crosby. The house looked like something out of a magazine, and for the first time in months, I felt proud, excited, nervous, even. At 2:30, I texted Michael. Just a simple "see you soon." No response. At 3, I sat by the window. At 3:15, I started checking my phone. Maybe traffic, maybe Whitney had trouble getting ready. By 3:30, the food was starting to cool. I put the rolls back in the oven, lowered the music. Still no call. No text. At 3:45, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped. I smoothed my dress and hurried to the door. But it wasn't them. It was a courier. Some college kid in a windbreaker holding a manila envelope. Delivery for Mrs. Helen Clark. Yes, I said, confused. He handed it to me and walked away without a word. I stood there on the porch, the wind biting through my dress sleeves, staring at the envelope in my hands. Inside was a note, written in Whitney's neat, looping handwriting. "Helen, we're so sorry. We decided to spend Christmas at my mom's house this year. It was a last-minute change. We hope you understand. Love, Whitney." No explanation. No apology. No, let's reschedule. Just that. They'd been planning this. I knew it. The silence, the vague answers about timing, the way Michael hadn't called all week. They didn't forget. They chose not to come. I stood in my perfect kitchen, food still warm on the stove, candles flickering low, the table set for 3, and realized I'd been waiting for something that was never going to happen. I poured a glass of tea and sat at the head of the table. I looked across at the 2 empty plates and tried to eat, but my throat wouldn't let me swallow. I stared at the ham I'd basted, the pie I'd cooled, the stuffing I'd made by hand. None of it mattered now. The house felt cold again, no matter how warm the oven was. I turned off the music, blew out the candles, packed the food into containers, and slid them into the fridge. All except the pie. I left that out on the counter, untouched. The phone never rang. No texts. No photos. No Merry Christmas. Later that evening, I opened Facebook. Whitney's mother had posted a picture. Her dining room table. Full house. Wine glasses. Plates half empty. Michael was sitting beside Whitney, holding her hand, smiling. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I just stared at the screen and thought, they didn't just forget. They left me out on purpose. And that's when I knew something had changed. Maybe not just this year. Maybe it had been changing for a long time, and I just didn't want to see it. But now I did, and I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. If you've ever felt forgotten by the very people you loved most, hit subscribe. Not for me, do it for every person sitting at a quiet table, wondering why love got so quiet. And if you don't feel the need to subscribe, at least tell us in the comments. Why not? I'll be reading every word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the tree lights still glowing, just me and that quiet house. The chair where Randall used to sit was right across from me. I used to complain he always fell asleep there after dinner, snoring through the Hallmark movies. Now, I'd give anything to hear that sound again. I thought back to Christmases when Michael was little. Randall would string the lights on the porch while I baked sugar cookies in the kitchen. Michael used to run around in his footy pajamas, more excited about the wrapping paper than the toys. Randall always insisted on reading The Night Before Christmas by the fire. He'd hold the book open with one hand and pull Michael onto his lap with the other. That chair belonged to Randall, but on Christmas Eve, it always fit them both. We had our traditions. I'd make a big breakfast Christmas morning, eggs, sausage, cinnamon rolls. Randall would sneak a piece of pie before lunch, and I'd pretend not to notice. The day always ended with us sitting on the couch, tired and happy, watching the same old Christmas movies we'd seen 100 times before. But after Michael got married, things started changing. The first Christmas they were married, Whitney said they were spending it with her parents. I understood. Newlyweds want to make new memories. I told them we'd do something the week after. Then the next year, it was the same. We're going to Whitney's folks again. I told myself it was just a phase. They were young, busy, juggling work and travel. I didn't want to be one of those mothers who made everything about herself. Still, every year, it seemed like I became more of a backup plan. When they did visit, it was always rushed. We can't stay long. We have to head back before traffic gets bad. Whitney never helped in the kitchen. She'd sit with her phone, scrolling or taking calls, while I cooked. Michael would try to act like he was helping, but he was glued to her side, waiting for her signal that it was time to go. Last year, they showed up 2 hours late, already full from eating at her mother's house. They poked at their food, complimented everything just enough to be polite, then left before dessert. Still, I kept trying. I thought if I just made it nice enough, warm enough, familiar enough, they'd come around. That maybe once they saw what they were missing, they'd remember what it used to feel like. But this year was different. I was alone. Randall wasn't here. And for the first time, they didn't even bother to show up. They didn't even call. I sat there, wondering what I did wrong. Did I push too hard? Did I guilt them too much? Did I talk about Randall too often and make the house feel heavy? Or maybe I wasn't modern enough. Maybe I talked too much about how things used to be. Maybe Whitney didn't like that I kept Randall's old flannel robe hanging on the hook by the front door. Or that I still used the landline. I don't know. I reached for my tablet and scrolled through Facebook. I don't usually look through Whitney's mother's page, but that night I did. There they were. All smiles. Long table, white tablecloth, shiny dishes, candles glowing. Whitney in a green sweater, holding a glass of red wine. Michael beside her, laughing at something someone said. Her mother had written, "So grateful for a house full of family this Christmas." There was even a caption under one photo, "Thankful for another year surrounded by love." It stung more than I expected, not because they were happy, but because they didn't even think of me when they wrote that. I looked at the time. 9:41 p.m. Still nothing from Michael. Not even a message to say Merry Christmas. I thought maybe he'd text when things quieted down. He always used to, even during college, even when he was overseas for work. But now, silence. I looked around my living room. The stockings still hung on the fireplace. One for me, one for Randall, one for Michael. I hadn't taken them down yet. I don't know why. Maybe I thought seeing them would keep things feeling normal. But nothing felt normal. The house wasn't just quiet. It was hollow, like something had been taken from it. Not just Randall, not just the noise, but the connection. The feeling that I belonged in someone's life. I walked over to the dining table and started clearing the plates. The food had gone cold. I packed it all into containers, every bite untouched. I wrapped the pie and set it in the fridge. I didn't want to see it on the counter in the morning. As I wiped down the table, I glanced over at Randall's chair again. I remembered the year Michael bought him a bottle of bourbon and said, "Dad deserves something special this Christmas." I remembered Randall tearing up. He wasn't an emotional man, but that moment touched him. And now, just a few years later, his son didn't even pick up the phone. I sat down on the edge of the bed later that night, still in that red dress. My hair was falling out of its pins, and the mascara I'd carefully put on that afternoon had smudged. I was 72 years old, and somehow, in the span of one holiday, I felt older than I ever had before. That night, I lay in bed with the lights off, Randall's old robe folded beside me, and I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit, not even to myself. Michael had started letting go of me a long time ago. I just hadn't noticed until now. They didn't just abandon me. They made sure I saw it. If that doesn't sting, I don't know what will. If you believe no one deserves to be treated like that, subscribe. If you don't, then comment and tell me why someone should watch their family laugh from a screen instead of their living room. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I hadn't really slept, just laid there thinking. The tree lights were still glowing in the living room. I hadn't turned them off the night before. The house was quiet, too quiet. I didn't bother making coffee right away. I pulled on a sweater and stepped outside into the cold. The yard was still damp from overnight frost. I wrapped my arms around myself and walked the stone path out toward the garden. Randall used to say that walking in the yard first thing in the morning helped him think. I didn't understand it back then. Now I do. I walked past the raised beds we used to tend together, past the old bench that needed sanding, and stopped at the bird feeder hanging from the maple tree. I wasn't sure why. Maybe just habit. Randall used to refill it every Saturday, like clockwork. And that's when I saw it. There was an envelope tucked just behind the feeder, wedged between the post and the wooden roof. It was sealed, but dusty around the edges like it had been there for some time. I took it down slowly. The handwriting was what stopped me cold. It was Randall's, slanted cursive, a little shaky, but still neat. I ran my fingers across my name. Just Helen. No last name, no address. Just like how he used to label my birthday cards. The corner of the envelope was stamped with a date. 11 months ago, 1 week before he passed. I just stood there for a second, holding it. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at it for a while. I wasn't sure I was ready to read it, but I opened it anyway. His writing filled one sheet. No greeting, no small talk. Just, if you're reading this, something has happened I hoped wouldn't. Go to my desk. The top drawer. There's more. That's all he wrote. I pushed back from the table and went straight to the study. Randall's old desk was still just how he left it. His pens lined up, calculator beside a legal pad with numbers scribbled in the margin. I opened the top drawer. There, taped to the bottom of the inside panel, was another envelope, this one thicker. He had folded the edges to seal it tight, and there was a paper clip holding a small gold key. Inside the envelope was a folded note and a printed document, but it was the note that I read first. Helen, if Michael ever shuts you out, this will make sense. You'll find everything you need to know at the place this key opens. It's yours. Always was. You just didn't know it. That was it. I sat there, key in one hand, letter in the other, feeling the weight of something I didn't yet understand. He planned this. Randall, with his quiet ways and calm voice, had left something behind. Something he didn't trust our son to protect. I took a breath and looked back at the folded paper that had come with the key. It was a deed, legal looking, with my name on it. I read the address twice to be sure. It was a place in Hendersonville, about 45 minutes from our house in Asheville. I didn't recognize the street. Randall had never mentioned any other property to me. I thought we owned one house, the house we lived in. I pulled out my phone and typed the address into the map. It popped up as a cottage on a quiet road near the mountains. No photos, no listing, just a red pin on the screen. I sat there for a long time trying to piece it together. Why would Randall keep a place from me? Why leave a key behind? And why now? But the note kept echoing in my mind. If Michael ever shuts you out. He knew. He saw it coming. Maybe not this exact Christmas. Maybe not Whitney's note on my doorstep. But something. He knew something about Michael that I didn't want to admit. That he could turn cold. That he could forget where he came from. Randall had always been quieter about these things. I was the one who believed in giving second chances. Third ones, too. Randall, he kept records. Mental and written. I picked up the key and turned it in my hand. Smooth edges. Brass. Looked old, but still worked fine. Whatever door it opened, Randall wanted me to find it when I needed answers. And I needed them now. I looked over at the picture on the bookshelf. The one of me, Randall, and Michael when he graduated from college. Randall had his hand on Michael's shoulder. I was holding on to Randall's arm. We were all smiling, but even now I could see it. Randall's eyes weren't on the camera. They were on Michael, watching him. That night, I packed a small bag, a few clothes, flashlight, extra pair of shoes. I didn't know what I was driving into, but something told me I shouldn't wait. Whatever Randall left behind, it was waiting. And now I was ready to find it. As I zipped the bag shut, I caught sight of the red dress I'd worn the day before, still hanging on the back of the chair. It looked different now, not like a holiday memory, but like a reminder of what was missing, of who I used to be when I thought family would always be there. Randall had been gone almost a year, but somehow it felt like he'd just spoken to me for the first time in months. And I was finally ready to listen. I left just after sunrise. It was cold out, but the roads were clear. I brought a thermos of coffee and a peanut butter sandwich, just in case I got hungry. That's how Randall always packed for trips, even short ones. Take more than you need. Just in case, he'd say. The GPS said 46 minutes to the address in Hendersonville. I drove past rolling hills and winter trees, past gas stations I'd stopped at over the years, but I didn't recognize the road when I got close. It was tucked behind a small hardware store, then down a gravel path with no sign. I had to slow the car and check the numbers twice before I found it. There it was, an old white farmhouse with blue shutters and a stone porch. Nothing fancy, not run down either, just quiet, like it was waiting for someone. I pulled into the gravel driveway and parked. The front steps creaked as I walked up. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the key. It slid into the lock like it belonged. When the door clicked open, something inside me shifted. Like a memory you didn't know you had suddenly comes rushing back. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The air was warm, like someone had been there recently. Everything was clean, not spotless, but taken care of. There was a small entryway with a wooden bench, boots lined up neatly beside it, a coat rack with one of Randall's old jackets hanging there. I took a few steps forward into the living room, and that's when I saw the pictures. On the mantel above the fireplace, there were framed photos. One of me and Randall at the beach, another from our 35th anniversary. One I hadn't seen before, Randall sitting in a rocking chair on this very porch, holding a cup of coffee. I looked around and realized all the furniture matched our taste. Not store-bought sets, but pieces Randall had refinished over the years. The lamp with the little stain on the shade. The quilt from our old guest room. It was like someone had taken pieces of our life and set them up in this house. There was a folded note sitting on the coffee table. I sat down slowly and opened it. This is yours, in case they ever forget who you are. Randall. That's all it said. No explanation. No date. I set the note down and looked around again. Every detail felt familiar, even though I'd never stepped foot in that house before. The curtains were the same pattern I used in our first home. The bookshelf had the same order of titles Randall kept back in Asheville. It wasn't just a house, it was a backup version of our life. One he had created without telling me. I stood and walked into the kitchen. The pantry was stocked. Canned vegetables, boxed pasta, jars of peanut butter, bags of rice. Nothing expired. The fridge was unplugged, but clean. There was even a grocery list taped to the inside of the cabinet door, written in his handwriting. Just staples: coffee, bread, eggs, sugar. The table in the corner had 2 chairs, a placemat on each side. It looked like he'd planned for both of us to be here. I opened the drawers. Everything was labeled: measuring cups, tea towels, spare batteries. Like he knew someone might be opening them for the first time. I walked down the hallway and peeked into the bedrooms. One had a quilt on the bed, neatly folded. A small lamp. No dust. The other room was empty except for boxes stacked in one corner. Some were marked Helen's things. I didn't open them yet. I didn't know if I was ready. Back in the living room, I sat on the couch and stared at the fireplace. Randall had done this for me, not just in case something happened, but in case the people closest to me forgot how to treat me. He had watched it happen. The slow shift, the way Michael stopped calling regularly, the way Whitney took over holidays, the way I kept making excuses for both of them. He knew. And instead of saying something that might tear the family apart, he built me a safety net. One I didn't even know I had until now. I picked up the note again. This is yours, in case they ever forget who you are. It hit me different the second time. He wasn't just talking about a house. He meant me, my worth, my identity, the person I used to be before I started shrinking myself to keep the peace, before I stopped saying how I really felt. This house, this little farmhouse, was his way of reminding me I was still someone worth showing up for. I made tea in the kitchen using the kettle on the stove. I found a tin of chamomile in the cabinet, sat by the window with my cup, and just looked out at the yard. There was a birdhouse in the back, another bench near a patch of dead grass that might have been a flower bed in spring. It was quiet, but not empty. I could almost hear him saying, "It's not much, but it's ours." I stayed there most of the morning, just walking through each room, letting myself feel every part of it. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. There was something calming about knowing he'd thought this far ahead, that he'd made a plan, not out of fear, but out of love. And the strangest part, Michael didn't know this place existed, which meant he couldn't take it from me, couldn't sell it, couldn't control it, couldn't say it needed managing or convince me to downsize. This was out of reach. It was mine, just mine. I looked around the living room again, the photos, the chair, the coat by the door. And for the first time in almost a year, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt found. 3 days after I visited the farmhouse, I got a phone call. I almost didn't answer it. I don't usually pick up numbers I don't recognize. But something told me to press accept. Mrs. Helen Clark, the man asked, formal but not cold. Yes, speaking. My name is Gerald Benton. I was your husband's accountant. I sat down. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. He said, I've been meaning to call, but I wasn't sure if now was the right moment. I told him it was fine. Truth was, I didn't know what the right moment was anymore. Well, he continued, Randall left some specific instructions regarding his trust. I was only to contact you if something changed, if anything didn't feel quite right with the family. He paused, like he was testing the waters. I take it you've had a change in how things feel? I looked at the red envelope on the table, the one Whitney had sent with the courier on Christmas Day. Yes, I said quietly. I suppose I have. I think it's time you and I sat down. He said, there's some information your husband wanted you to have, should circumstances shift the way he feared they might. He didn't say Michael's name. He didn't have to. We met the next day at a modest office in South Asheville. His place was on the second floor of a brick building with a bakery downstairs. The kind of spot you walk by a dozen times and never notice. Mr. Benton was older than I expected, late 60s, maybe, trim gray hair and kind eyes behind simple glasses. He shook my hand like he meant it and led me into a room filled with filing cabinets and old pictures of mountain trails and lighthouses. Once we sat, he pulled out a slim black folder. Before we begin, he said, I just want to say, your husband was a very smart man, and a careful one. I nodded. He always had a backup plan. Exactly, Benton said. Randall kept most of his financials straightforward. But 5 years ago, he quietly moved a portion of his retirement savings into a separate trust, in your name only, fully private. It's not listed on the family portfolio. I blinked. I didn't know about that. He didn't want you to, not until it mattered. He opened the folder and turned it toward me. There's a little over $650,000 in here, conservatively managed, not touched since he set it up. I stared at the page. My name printed clearly at the top. No joint holder, no successor. He called it the just-in-case fund, Mr. Benton said. Said if anything ever happened to him and you felt pressured or shut out, you'd have your own footing. My hands felt cold. I had no idea. He nodded. That was the point. He didn't want anyone to convince you to part with it before you were ready, not even him. I sat back. Why would he think I'd need protection? Mr. Benton gave me a careful look, then pulled out another paper. Because of this, he said. It was a short summary, a history of financial requests over the past decade. 3 stood out right away, each one from Michael. Your son came to Randall for help, he explained. First time was in 2014. Said he wanted to open a home remodeling business. Randall gave him $25,000 as a gift. That didn't surprise me. I remembered Randall saying something about it years ago. Michael had sent a thank you card, even brought flowers. Then in 2016, he asked again, this time for $75,000. Randall said no. I raised my eyebrows. Michael never told me that. Mr. Benton pulled another paper. Randall said no again in 2019. Same request, new spin. This time it was Whitney's dream of flipping houses. Randall still said no. Did they ever find out about the trust? No, he said, but they pushed hard on him in that last year. Called often. Sent emails. Randall showed me some of them. He handed me copies. I read them slowly. One said, "We just want Mom to be taken care of, but we need more control if we're going to help you manage things." Another read, "We can't do long-term planning if everything's still tied up in Mom's name." There it was, hidden behind concern, polite on the surface, but every line was asking for the same thing. Power. Mr. Benton let me read in silence. When I finished, he said, "There's something else." He reached for one more document. It's from 2018. A bank flagged it. The paper was a copy of a cash check. It had my signature on it, or something that looked like it. This was a withdrawal for $15,000. He said, "Drawn from your joint account, marked for house updates." Your signature was close, but not exact. Randall noticed, had it looked at. I looked closer. It was my name, all right, but not my hand. I never wrote this. I know. Randall kept quiet about it because he didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. But after some digging, he found the trail. The check was handed to a contractor in Tennessee for a rental property Whitney was managing. My mouth went dry. They forged my name? Mr. Benton nodded. Randall confronted them. Quietly. Whitney denied it. Michael said it must have been a mistake. But Randall told me that after that day, he started separating more of the assets. I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry you're learning all this like this," he said gently, "but your husband wanted you to know the full picture. He saw the writing on the wall. And they've been waiting for my name to disappear." I whispered. He nodded. Randall believed so. His exact words were, "They're not planning for her future. They're planning around it." I sat there for a while, holding the folder in my lap. So much made sense now. The rushed visits, the way Whitney always asked about paperwork, the way Michael danced around money, never asking me directly, but always bringing it up. Mr. Benton leaned forward. "The trust is yours, Mrs. Clark. No one else can touch it. And there's more coming." Randall arranged a transfer from a small account he kept under a business LLC. He left instructions to move it if this meeting ever happened. I looked at him. "How much?" "Another 82,000, he said. I shook my head. He never told me. "No," he said, "but he didn't want to. He wanted you to feel secure without having to ask for it. This was about giving you options." I felt my throat tighten. He stood and handed me the folder. "Everything you need is in here. I'll help with the paperwork when you're ready. There's no rush." As I left his office, the cold hit me hard. I stood outside for a moment, breathing in the winter air. My whole life had just shifted. Again, Randall had been gone almost a year, but he was still here in his quiet way, still taking care of me, still one step ahead. And now I saw what he saw. I wasn't crazy for feeling shut out. I wasn't imagining it. They had plans that didn't include me. But now I had one of my own. If your own child ever tried to erase you from your future, wouldn't you want someone to care? Subscribe if you believe mothers deserve better. And if you think I'm overreacting, tell me in the comments. Go ahead, I want to hear it. I got back from Mr. Benton's office just before sunset. The sky was a dull gray, and everything felt quiet. One of those cold days where the air bites at your cheeks before you even reach the door. I parked in the driveway and grabbed my bag off the seat. I didn't even make it to the porch before I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Michael's. I stood there for a second, just watching it. Engine still running. headlights on. And in the passenger seat, Whitney. She was staring at her phone like she hadn't even noticed I'd pulled up. I walked up the steps, turned the key, and stepped into the warmth of my house. Before I could even take off my coat, I heard footsteps behind me. Mom. I turned. Michael was on the porch. He didn't smile. He just shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and looked like he was forcing himself to seem calm. We need to talk. I nodded and held the door open, but only just enough. He didn't step in. I know Christmas was messed up. He started. Messed up? I didn't say anything. Just waited. He shifted on his feet. Whitney thought it'd be easier to spend it at her mom's this year. Things got busy, and we didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. He rubbed his neck like the words were itchy coming out. You could have called. I said, I know. I should have. That's on me. Another pause. I could hear the car still running behind him. Whitney hadn't gotten out. Michael looked down, then back up. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Here it comes. About Dad's stuff, he said. The old accounts. I've been going through some of the files he left in the garage, and I thought maybe if you needed help sorting anything, financial stuff, maybe some of the paperwork, I could help. I stared at him. He looked just like Randall in that moment. Same brow line, same eyes. But that expression, that tone, that wasn't Randall. That was something else. What made you think I needed help? I asked. He blinked. Well, you've been quiet, and we've been worried. I leaned against the doorframe. You haven't called in 3 weeks. I know, but things have been hectic. Whitney's been trying to get the business going, and we're looking at refinancing the house. You mean the rental house in Tennessee? He froze. I saw it hit him. He hadn't expected me to know that. How did you? Don't worry about how. I said, just answer me one thing. He looked at me, waiting. Did you know she forged my name on that check? He looked away. That was answer enough. I let that hang in the air a moment, then stepped back and opened the door wider, not to invite him in, but to make my next words clear. You weren't checking in on me, I said. You were checking on what I have. Mom. No, don't interrupt. He closed his mouth. I know about the trust. I know about the accounts Dad moved. I know about the requests you made, the ones he turned down. He looked like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Except this time, it wasn't cookies. It was my future. You think I don't know when someone's playing nice just to see what they can get? He stepped forward. It's not like that. We were just trying to make sure things are manageable. For who? For you. You've been through a lot. And you figured now was a good time to step in and take over? He didn't answer. I looked past him, toward the car. Whitney still hadn't moved. She's not coming in? I asked. He shook his head. She thought it'd be better if I talked to you alone. She's probably worried you'll say too much. Mom, you're overthinking this. No, I'm finally thinking clearly. He shifted again. I don't need help managing anything. I said, I've got everything I need. Randall made sure of that. His jaw tightened. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. He said, softer now. I nodded. I am, for the first time in a while. He stood there, not knowing what to say. The cold started to creep into the doorway. Go home, Michael, I said. Tell Whitney I said hello. He opened his mouth like he wanted to fight back, but then he thought better of it. Without another word, he turned and walked back to the car. I watched him climb in, watched Whitney lean over to say something. The car backed out, paused for a second at the end of the driveway, then drove off. I closed the door. The house was still warm. The windows had fogged slightly from the cold outside and the heat inside. I wiped one clear with my sleeve and watched the car disappear down the street. They didn't come to fix things. They came to test the waters. to see what I knew, to feel out what they might still have access to. And now they knew. I wasn't going to hand anything over. I wasn't going to shrink myself or apologize for not being ready to forget what they'd done. Randall saw this coming. He didn't leave me the farmhouse just for peace and quiet. He left it to remind me who I was. And now I was starting to remember. 2 mornings later, the phone rang. It was just after 7 a.m., and I barely poured my coffee. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. Then I saw the name flash across the screen. Della Morgan. I picked up right away. "Morning, Della," I said. She didn't even say hello. "Helen, have you heard what Whitney's planning?" My heart skipped. "What are you talking about?" "She's telling folks, mostly her side, of course, that you're not well, that you might need someone to step in legally. A cousin of mine heard it from her sister-in-law, who still works at the courthouse in Waynesville." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "What exactly did she say?" "They're saying you're showing signs of confusion, that you've been isolating, that you're unstable." She said the last word carefully, like it tasted wrong coming out of her mouth. I didn't respond right away. "She's trying to build a case," Della said. "And if she's serious, they could try to challenge your ability to manage your affairs. Your house. Your money." It didn't even surprise me. "She's clever," I said. "Always careful not to get her hands dirty directly." "Smart enough to know you've got something she wants," Della replied, "but not smart enough to realize you've still got fight in you." I let out a breath. I didn't want to believe it would come to this. "I know, honey," she said gently. "None of us want to believe that about our own. But here we are." Della had been my neighbor for almost 20 years. A war widow, sharp as a tack, straight-talking, and the kind of woman who never let her tea steep too long or let a lie hang in the air. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're just waking up. There's a difference." That one sentence hit me harder than I expected. I stood at the sink for a while after we hung up. I stared out the window, watching 2 cardinals hop around under the maple tree, my hand still on the phone, not moving. I wasn't crazy. I'd spent so long doubting myself, wondering if maybe I was just too emotional, too sensitive, too nostalgic. But now I saw it clear as day. This wasn't about emotions. This was about power, about control. And I was standing in the way of what they thought they deserved. Later that afternoon, Della came over. She brought her laptop, a binder full of printed templates, and a loaf of cornbread like she always did when something serious was about to go down. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one Michael and Whitney hadn't sat at in years. "All right," she said, flipping open the binder. "We're going to put this in writing. No more games. No more waiting." We drafted a formal letter, direct but respectful. It outlined that I was of sound mind, managing my personal affairs, and fully capable of making legal decisions. We included a note that I'd be retaining counsel going forward, and that any attempt to challenge my capacity would be met with full resistance under the law. She even included a copy of a notarized statement I'd made at her church the month before, affirming my health and state of mind. I added one line at the bottom in my handwriting. "I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am simply done being treated like an afterthought." We printed it out, signed it, scanned it, and sent it certified mail to both Michael and Whitney. Della leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "There," she said, "they can't say they weren't warned." I stared at the letter sitting in the outgoing tray, the ink still drying. "I'm done begging to be loved," I said out loud. Della looked at me. "Say it again." I did, and it felt like something in me broke free. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was letting go of the part of me that kept waiting, waiting for them to come around, waiting for them to act like family. waiting for some version of the past to walk through the door and apologize. But that version of the past didn't exist anymore. After Della left, I stood by the front window and watched the light change outside. The air was sharp and cold. Frost lined the edges of the glass. The garden was quiet again, but I wasn't. That night, I sat down with a notepad and wrote out my own list. Not things to fix or cook or organize, but things I wanted to do for me, not for Michael, not for Whitney, not for some idea of the family we used to be. For me, take a day trip to Charleston, paint the back room at the farmhouse, start the garden early this year, just flowers, nothing edible. Write Randall a letter. Simple things. But every word felt like a piece of myself I was putting back together. And as I sat in my quiet living room, one thought kept circling back around in my head. They walked away, but I didn't disappear. This world has enough people waiting to be chosen. Some of us finally choose ourselves. If that kind of strength means something to you, click subscribe. If not, I dare you to comment and explain why. Let's hear it. A week after we sent the letter to Michael and Whitney, I got a knock on the door. It was early afternoon. I was home, folding laundry in the living room, a rerun playing low on the TV. I peeked through the window first, out of habit now. It was Mr. Benton. I opened the door and smiled. "You didn't call." "I didn't want to," he said, holding up a small cardboard box. This needed to be handed over in person. I stepped aside, and he came in, carefully setting the box on the kitchen table. It wasn't big, about the size of a shoebox, but taped neatly with my name on top in Randall's handwriting. I felt a little dizzy just seeing it. "Randall gave me this the week before he passed," Mr. Benton said. "Told me not to hand it over until I was sure you were ready." He paused, then added, "You're ready?" He didn't stay long, just long enough to explain that this wasn't legal paperwork. "It's personal," he said. He wanted it to be just between you and him. I nodded and walked him to the door. Back inside, I sat down with a cup of tea and slowly opened the box. Inside was a leather-bound journal, dark green, the kind Randall used to buy at the stationery shop downtown, the one that closed 5 years ago. I ran my fingers across the cover. It was worn at the edges. He'd filled it. The first page simply said, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say all this out loud. So here it is. All of it. No more holding back." I turned to the next page. He wrote every entry by hand. The ink smudged in a few places. Some words crossed out, others circled. He dated each entry. They began almost exactly 1 year before he passed. The first few entries were simple. Updates on how he was feeling, things he'd noticed. The weather, my favorite meals. But by the 5th page, the tone started to change. He wrote about his fears. Not of dying, Randall never feared that. He feared what would happen to me after. He wrote, "Helen is the strongest person I know. But strong people get tired too. And if she's tired, she won't ask for help. She'll just smile and keep serving everyone else until there's nothing left for herself." He was right. He went on. "Michael's been distant. I've noticed. It's not just work. Whitney has a way of making him feel like I'm a chore. Like Helen's old-fashioned. Like she's someone to be tolerated instead of treasured." I sat there, my hands shaking slightly, page after page. He poured out everything he saw, but never said. He talked about the late-night talks we used to have. The way I used to hum while folding towels. The way Michael used to run into my arms after school. And how slowly that boy disappeared. Randall didn't just see the changes. He felt them. And he knew I was feeling them, too, even if I hadn't said a word. Halfway through the journal, he wrote something that stopped me cold. If you ever find yourself sitting at our table alone, wearing that red dress, waiting for someone who doesn't show, know that I saw it coming. And it has nothing to do with you. They left. But you are still here. And you are still enough. I had to close the journal for a moment. I pressed my hand to my chest and took a few deep breaths. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear landed on the page. When I kept reading, I found entries where he started planning. He had met with Mr. Benton, talked through what to do if things turned cold. He had the farmhouse titled in my name, created the private trust, and had one more thing I hadn't known about. A foundation. It wasn't big yet, but it had a name. The Helen J. Clark Fund for Independent Women. He wrote, I've set aside a small sum to start. It's not much now, but with time and the right people, it'll grow. It's meant for women like Helen, widows, grandmothers, caretakers, who've spent a life giving and one day realize they've been left behind. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My name, in his handwriting, not as just a wife or mother, but as something more, as someone who mattered, not for what she did for others, but for who she was. He wrote a mission statement, listed ideas, places to reach out to. One note said, maybe Della can help get the word out. She's got that church newsletter. I laughed through my tears. He knew how things worked in this town. Toward the end of the journal, his handwriting got shakier. Shorter entries, more gaps between dates. I could tell he was getting tired. But the final page, it was written slowly with care. No corrections. Just one final thought. If they choose to walk out of your life, let them. What's meant to stay, stays. What's meant to love you will. That did it. I held the journal against my chest and sobbed. Not the kind of crying that breaks you, but the kind that cleans you out. That makes room for what's next. I stayed there a long time, letting it wash over me. All the fear, all the guilt, the waiting, the wondering, the quiet prayers I never said out loud. Randall had already answered them, not with flowers or big speeches, but with steady love, with plans, with truth. And now I finally saw what he'd been trying to show me all along. I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming. And no one, not even family, could take that away from me. 1 year later, same house, same porch, same month, but everything feels different. I wake up on Christmas morning, and there's a quiet peace in the air. Not the kind that comes from hoping, the kind that comes from knowing. The farmhouse smells like cinnamon and roasted sweet potatoes. The oven hums gently. Della's already in the kitchen, banging around pots like she owns the place. And honestly, I don't mind one bit. I pour my coffee and sit at the table while she stirs her pecan glaze. You really went all out, Helen, she says, eyeing the 2 pies cooling on the windowsill. Just enough, I say, smiling. They'll eat every crumb. Because this year, I invited people who actually show up. I sent out the invitations in November. Nothing fancy, just some little cards from the dollar store. I handed a few to the women at the senior center's quilting club. Others went to the young man who runs the art program at the church. He brings in local kids once a week for painting and drawing lessons. Some of them don't have much, but they sure know how to make a room feel alive. When I told them I was hosting dinner, they didn't hesitate. We'll be there, they said. And they meant it. At 3 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rings. And then again, and again. Voices fill the house. Coats are hung, hats tossed in the basket by the stairs. A little boy named Isaiah runs straight to the living room, pointing at the tree. You got real candy canes, he shouts. I laugh. Only way to do it. Within half an hour, my house is buzzing. Every chair is filled. The table is loud and bright and full of food. Della's fussing over the gravy. Gloria from the quilting club is telling a story about her high school sweetheart. Someone turns on a record player, and Bing Crosby hums in the background. It's not perfect. Someone spills juice on the tablecloth. The ham is a little overcooked, and one of the teenagers accidentally knocks over a vase in the hallway. But I've never felt more full. The tree in the corner is smaller than last year's, but it sparkles with handmade ornaments from the kids. Little snowmen made out of cotton balls. Paper stars colored with crayon. Not store-bought. Real. And then there's the card. It arrived 3 days before Christmas. No return address. Just a small cream envelope with my name written in Michael's handwriting. Inside, Merry Christmas, Mom. Hope you're doing well. Michael and Whitney. No apology. No mention of last year. No phone call. No invitation to anything. Just a card. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I just placed it in a drawer. Because this year wasn't about them. This year was about building something new. Last year, I waited. I cooked. I set a table for people who never planned to show up. This year, I stopped waiting. And that changed everything. After dinner, some of the kids go outside to play with the new sidewalk chalk we handed out as gifts. The grown-ups sip coffee and nibble leftover pie. Someone starts singing along to Silent Night. I slip out to the porch with a glass of red wine. The sky is streaked with soft pink and gold. Cold air nips at my cheeks, but I don't mind. It's real. It's clean. It reminds me I'm alive. Behind me, Della laughs loudly at something. Her voice carries through the open window, and I hear her shout, "You better not be sneaking another roll, Isaiah." I smile. The porch light flickers on, casting a warm glow across the steps. I sit down in Randall's old rocker and wrap the blanket tighter around my shoulders. I think about him. He would have loved this. Not just the food or the music, but the way the house feels. Alive, open, honest. He always said, you don't need blood to build a family. You need heart. Turns out he was right. And maybe it took a year of heartbreak and silence and facing truths I didn't want to see, but I finally stopped hoping the people I loved would turn into people who loved me back the right way. And I started loving the people who already knew how. I look back through the window. The table is full again. Different faces, different names, but it's full. And then it hits me. This is the dinner that mattered, not the one I waited for last year. Not the one that left me with a cold plate and a quiet phone. This one, this table, these people. I sip my wine and lean back in the chair, listening to the sounds of life spilling out of my home. You see, last year I invited my son and his wife to Christmas dinner. They chose another table, so I built a new one. And now, this table is where I belong. Let them send cards. Let them whisper and plan and watch from a distance. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm just full. So let me ask you, whoever's listening, whoever's been sitting with this story, if you were in my place, would you still set the table for people who never planned to show up? You heard my question. Now answer it with your mouse. Click subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild from heartbreak. If you won't subscribe, fine. But don't scroll away. Scroll down and tell us why. Say it in the comments. I want to understand.